is going to be another AD&D Toolkit tutorial video. One of the more recent ones I did was on creating cities within your Toolkit account. Today we're going to talk about managing them. So I'm going to go to my testing campaign here. And this is where you would create your cities. You name them, you establish the type of climate, the size, so it's either a village, town, or true city, depending on the population size. And then terrain type, mountainous, hills, flatland, forest, jungle, and coastal. And then those parameters factor into other systems that you game within. And one that I typically default to is like Disease Contraction. In 1E, first edition AD&D, they've actually got a system to check if players contract diseases and parasitic infestations. And then those will impact the character's health and the way they perform, whether they can adventure at all or they need bed rest and so forth. And just to give you a quick for instance, if the characters, or I should say by default, I guess, typically the DM is supposed to roll once a month to see if a parasite was contracted or diseased. But if that character is in a very hot climate with an overcrowded population, you might be checking once a week. And so Toolkit needs to know those parameters to do all of those calculations and rolls automatically for you behind the scenes. You never have to touch it. But so you do want to create cities where your characters live or adventure. Once you've created them, we then manage them here. These are the cities that I've created in the past. I'm going to select my city of Arendelle to manage. When you manage them, either you're going to edit the city details here, or you're going to create shops. And we'll start with the city details. You can rename your city just by typing in a new name there. The city status, is it active or not? You can make it active, inactive, or choose delete to get rid of that city. That's permanent. But there can only be one active city. All the other cities that you create remain inactive. And the active city is the city or village or town that your party is currently involved in or around. So generally that's going to be the city they're residing in. But it doesn't have to be, because they might reside in one town. Let's call it town A. But then they go on a distant adventure, and when they're finished adventuring there and they're full of all their loot, they want to stop at a nearby town. So not the far off one, city A, where they typically reside, but city B, which is closer by, or maybe it has better shops there. And so they go to city B to sell off their loot. And so I'll want to make city B my active city, because that's the one we're actively adventuring near. But regardless, you can then change the climate, city size, or terrain. Those are all parameters you set when you create the city. You can change them here if you wish to for some reason. Maybe the population increases or decreases, say. And then there's two other parameters here that were not available when you created it. These are optional. These are largely homebrewed, if you want to use them or not. We'll start with lodging quality. When it's set to NA, that's representing disabled. So if you don't want to use this, just leave it alone. That's what it is by default. If you do want to use it, you can choose from wretched to poor to common to good or wealthy lodging qualities. And that lodging quality will then factor in again to several systems within Toolkit. That disease contraction I talked about earlier, if it's set at wretched quality, the lodging of the player characters we're talking about here, they're going to have a greater chance of contracting diseases because they're living in squalid, dirty conditions. And if you select wealthy here, they're going to have less of a chance of contracting those diseases. Something else that it factors into is, we're going to talk about in a moment, creating shops within Toolkit. Your characters can do all of their buying and selling of items, or you can actually process it for them through Toolkit. This will speed things up greatly for you as the DM. It allows you to have randomized prices. So for instance, the DM will set ranges for their different shops, and I'll get into more of that as we get into creating shops. But you can process the sale and purchase of items through Toolkit. And lodging quality can affect those prices. If your characters are currently residing in wretched or poor conditions, shopkeepers are less likely to give them favorable conditions when it comes to buying or selling. They're going to look down upon them as you typically would in a class-based system, social system. If your characters are living in very wealthy lodging conditions, then shopkeepers are more likely to give them favorable pricing when it comes to buying and selling items. Similarly, there's a charisma adjustment you can either enable or disable. I'm going to leave it disabled for this city. But what it does is it will take the charisma value, the highest charisma value within the party, so the character that has the highest charisma. If your party has a paladin, they're likely to have the highest charisma, 17 or 18. And if this is enabled, when your PCs go to, say, sell items that they've come across in their adventures to a shopkeeper, there will be an adjustment in the price that the shopkeeper offers based upon charisma. So if charisma is really high, those players are going to get favorable pricing adjustments. And if the charisma is low, they're going to get unfavorable pricing adjustments. And then you click edit, and that will establish those changes for you. The other thing I talked about you can do when you're managing your cities is creating shops. And this is the real deal here that you want to do. So let's say I'm going to create the Trusty Anvil, and that's going to be a blacksmith shop. Typically, you're going to want your shops to be active and not inactive, but you can deactivate them if they go out of business or whatever else. You don't want them available anymore. And then there's two sets of rates you need to establish when you initially create your shop. The rate that they'll buy back from players. So when players find loot on their adventures and want to sell it to a shop, this is the buyback range. Then the selling range is when shops have items they wish to sell to your players. Okay? And you're setting a range here that the shop, let's stick with buying back. So this is loot that your characters found and they want to sell to the shop. So the buyback range, I want that range for this shop. Let's say I have a shopkeeper who is new, really doesn't know what they're doing, and so they don't know how to appraise well. So I want a wide range here because sometimes they're going to be right on the money on the value of an item. Other times they're going to be wildly undervaluing it or overvaluing it. So the buyback rate I'm going to have from 20 to 80% for this shop. And the percentages are based upon book value. So the player's handbook or the DMG for magic items. Or if you as the DM, you can manually edit the value of any item within Toolkit. If you do, then the quote-unquote book value will be that manual override value that you as the DM entered. So the quote-unquote book value can be several different things, but originally it'll default to the player's handbook or the DMG. And what happens is when you first create the shop, it's going to do a randomized roll between 20 to 80%. And that is going to be the percentage of the book value that this shop will buy items from your players. So let's actually do this so you can see how that works. When it comes to selling, again, these are items the shop has and wants to sell to your players. And again, this shopkeeper doesn't know what they're doing, so I'm going to have a wide range here. I'm going to make it 70% to 150% of book value they'll sell an item for. And then you just simply click this create button and you'll see the Trusty Anvil shop appears down here. This is when they're selling items to the player, and this is when they're buying them back from the players. And just while we're here, if you click this little red X, that's how you can permanently delete a shop if you wish to get rid of it. But so this shop that I created, when it's selling items to your players, you'll see currently it's going to sell them at 95% of book value. All right, and that fits into the range that we established prior. What it does in this value column, that is the book value. So based upon the player's handbook, a small shield, a small metal shield, would typically sell for 10 gold pieces. Because this shop is selling it around 95% of that book value, it will sell this same small shield for 9 gold and 10 silver, which is like 9.5 gold or 95% of that 10 gold, which is the book value. And all of the items you can see from the player's handbook in G&G are listed here. Only ones that are particular to blacksmiths. I made this shop a blacksmith when I created up here. Again, that's where the shop category factors in. There's all different types of categories. I chose blacksmith for the trusty anvil. So only items that a blacksmith would be interested in or would craft or sell are listed here. All right, so for instance, a tent is not going to be sold at the trusty anvil. Down here is buyback rates. And so now I have characters within this campaign that I've already populated and plugged them in, and they have items on them. And all of that is read into Toolkit for you. So there's a player in my party called Warduke, there's another player called Sticky Fingers, another one called Monkey, Illusions, and the final guy's name is Witcher. And these are the items that all of those characters have in their inventory that this shopkeep would be interested in because they're a blacksmith. And you'll see they're pretty much all metallic items, thief tools. You might say it could be a tinker or a blacksmith. Scimitar, hammer, dagger, and so forth. Then the value column is, again, the book value typically for that item. So you'll see a long sword typically would sell for 15 gold. This chainmail, I think chainmail is typically 70, let me see. Yeah, 75. Typically chainmail sells for 75 gold, so that's the book value. This particular one, I had an override, and I established it as a magic +1 chainmail. The book value, according to the Dungeon Master's Guide, or the value that I plugged in as the DM, is 3,500 gold, much more. And then this is the actual offer in this column that the shopkeep will offer. This shopkeeper, based upon the range that I established earlier, they'll buy back items at 78% of book value. So this +1 chainmail, the book value is 3,500 gold, but this shopkeeper is only offering 78% of that, or 2,730 gold. All right, that's my character Warduke. Now, if I go to my character briefly, we'll see Warduke, and you'll see, let's actually go for that elfin chain. All right, so he's got a suit of elfin chainmail on him. Book value is 4,500 gold. I'm going to sell that. And to make that obvious, I'm going to set all the coins in his backpack to 0 currently. And we'll go back to Warduke. All right, you'll see he's got 0 for all the coins in his backpack. That means what he's currently carrying on him. And then I'm going to go back to my shop. So we're going to manage the city of Arendelle, go to the new shop I created called the Trusty Anvil. Here's that elfin chainmail. Book value is 4,500. This shopkeeper is only going to offer 78% of that, or 3,510. I'm going to check that as the DM and click sell. And boom, it's done. We'll go back now to Warduke, and you'll see the elfin chainmail is gone. It's no longer in his inventory or his backpack. And instead, he has 702 platinum. So when you get over a certain amount, I think I've got it set at 500 gold. When a sale transacts in excess of 500 gold, it converts it to platinum, because we couldn't burden reasonably this player with 3,500 or 2,700 gold pieces, too heavy for them to carry. So it does them the favor of converting it to platinum and drops it in their inventory. So that is the beauty of shops or managing cities within Toolkit. It automates all of this for you. Pricing, the exchange of coin and deleting the items saves the players and the DM a ton of time. it's very, very helpful. Not only do you as the DM get to establish these initial ranges that the shopkeepers will offer, but again, as I noted earlier, if you choose to optionally, you can factor in other items. I'm going to do that here, other parameters that will affect rates in your shop. And so, for instance, here, that buyback of 78% is now impacted 17.5% in the players to the player's advantage. That's why this is color coded green, because they have a character with higher charisma in there. So it can do all kinds of calculations for you. And one other thing I just wanted to point out in regards to the buyback here, and selling too, these ranges that you see once a month, and when I say once a month, I mean when 30 days transpire within your campaign, not real life. Once a game month, these rates are recalculated. They're rolled again randomly within the range that you established when you initially created this shop. So I don't recall, but I think I had like 20 to 70% might have been the buyback range initially for the shop. So once every 30 campaign days, this rate will be re-rolled by the system and establish a new buyback rate within that range. So this range might be 60% or 64% next month, and so forth. And that's just to reflect supply. If shops just have more items, available to sell, or demand, if you want to simulate less people happen to be in town, or less adventurers at least currently buying items, or maybe the shopkeep changed their rates or whatever. It's just establishing a randomization to the rates that fall within the ranges you as a DM establish. Even just from item to item, there's going to be a variability, especially for shopkeepers that, like this one, that don't know what they're doing. So that one day they may see a long sword and think it's of good quality and not very damaged. And so they're going to offer a great buyback rate on that, where really they were wrong. It might be ready to break, or it might be a very poor quality, very brittle sword, and they just don't know that because they're new. So we establish some variability here in that range by having it re-roll every month. But that's essentially managing shops in your city, and I hope that was helpful.